Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, depending on where you are in the world. Chris Richardson, President of BDB Solutions and General Counsel for BDB Solutions. Really happy to be here today to answer any questions that people might have. I'll start off by just talking a little bit about what's going on in general in the immigration space. BDB saw a huge influx of not just green card approvals, which is great, but also we saw a huge influx of approvals from the Department of Labor. The Department of Labor has also set up an office or a concierge office. So the DOL's new leader, who we know and we've been working with, is really taking DOL seriously. And so I think that DOL has had like a huge wait time, 16, 18 months. But remember that prevailing wages also had a huge wait time as well, and DOL was able to get that in control. I suspect that we're going to see the same thing. I don't want to say that it's a trend, but we've certainly seen green cards DOL labor service approved a lot faster than before. And so I think that that's going to be the new trend, is seeing DOL cases get approved a lot faster than before. And as long as green cards are being approved a lot faster than before, then that should not impact the visa bulletin and visa retrogression as much. Fingers crossed. They both have to be working simultaneously. One in, one out. Although it's not quite one in one the same. Just because like the funnel is much smaller. But we have been talking to DOL about getting their speed up, and that's been successful. And we've also started talking to members of the Trump administration about some kind of relief on EB-3. So we'll see. We'll work on it. We're going to be working on it. But let me see. What are some of the questions here? Why doesn't BDB have a Western Union or MoneyGram account? I need to look into that. One question was about MoneyGram and Western Union. Let me ask my team to see what that is, because I don't know. I'm sure there's like some financial reason my our CFO will tell me about, but yeah, it's a good question. Another question here is, is possible in the visa pool? Let's see. Everyone see these days on your Facebook page, green card approvals and the priority dates, and they are in August and September. I don't think that is possible. Maybe that's an error in the video, because if your priority date is August or September 2021, you definitely shouldn't be getting a green card. And I don't think I've seen anybody with an approval from August or September of 2021. Now that doesn't say that doesn't happen. Now I have seen that happen before. There were, back when they were handing out green cards like candy back in 2023, they were so fast that in fact they were 2023, I'm sorry, early 2022, 2021, actually, they were handing them out so fast that they were actually people getting their green cards whose cases weren't even current. Now, some of those people, they got away with it, but other people, the USCIS actually did call them back in and try to revoke their visas. Although I think maybe only one of those they ended up revoking their visa for, their green card for. So the thing about green cards is that once you get it, it is really hard to take it away, right? Like unless, the employer or somebody can allege fraud or allege that, there was a misrepresentation. In these cases, if they give the visa and they didn't meet the visa bulletin, it's not really the foreign national's fault, right? That's really the government's fault. And that's what we've always held. In fact, I think a couple times we work with law firms to challenge that in court. And I think what the government ended up doing in one of those cases that actually was revoked is that the government, that person was only like, if they had just waited a couple more months, they would have been current anyway. And so as soon as their case did go current, the government sent them back their green card as if though they never took it in the first place. And they also let them continue working. And so even if you were in a situation hypothetically where you got your green card without actually it being current, it would be really, really tough for the government to take away. And the government just won't willy-nilly take it away. They're going to have to probably go to court over court for it. Let's see, is there any good news for short term in terms of the visa bulletin or Congress pushing the EB-3 visa? For the visa bulletin, yeah, I'll be really curious to see what, once we get into July, what August numbers look like. It's interesting, around this time of year is when the visa bulletin should start speeding up, especially heading into September. But the last couple of years, that has not been the case. There hasn't been surprisingly, there hasn't been a lot of change, but it does seem to be moving a lot faster. I think a lot of that movement is because, one, there are just fewer people, or I wouldn't say fewer, but certainly the same amount of people who are applying. The government is finding that even though there are a lot of applications from before, some of those people just don't want to do it anymore. Again, a lot of those people were in the bad old days of EB-3 in the late 2010s when you really did see a lot of applicants who were taken advantage of by other companies and people who signed up and no longer are interested in it. And I think that the government's already finding that. And I think that's why we've seen such a huge influx of green card approvals, is because the government is desperately looking to issue as many of these green cards as possible because they want to reach their 10,000 for the year. And they'll just continue moving it forward in time. And so like I always say this, I know it sounds like a broken record, but I really do wish the government would just audit all of its old cases. Because I think if they did, they would find that a lot of those old cases aren't even real anymore. And they should be moving the visa bulletin even further along. In terms of what Congress is doing, Congress isn't doing anything right now. The White House isn't doing anything right now. Really, they're focused on helping H-2B, helping H-2A, and trying to move the ball forward. Now, there are a couple of bills before Congress that have been discussed. I think once we get past the big, beautiful bill, there will be incentive and emphasis by the Trump administration to maybe push forward on immigration reform. I mean, anything's possible. But my hope is that he will, that the president, and we've been talking with the administration as well, that the administration is going to push forward on some kind of EB-3 reform, or not EB-3 reform, but certainly EB-3 visa relief. And what we push for is more help with maybe exempting dependents, because right now the majority of green card cases actually go to dependents. They don't even go to workers. They go to dependents. They go to spouses and their kids. I think like 60% of all the EB-3 workers are actually not even workers. And so exempting dependents would double the amount of green cards that are available. That would help with the visa bulletin as well. There's also moves, but I've always believed that it's not just about EB-3 either, though. Anything that helps any of the visa categories actually benefits EB-3, right? So let's say that the government exempts EB-3 skilled nurses, workers. Well, guess what? Like, that helps us, because if those people are no longer in line, all better, right? If they were to exempt EB-1, EB-2 doctors, that helps us, because that means there are lesser people in line. And so I do think that even if there is no specific thing on EB-3 Unskilled, any kind of help on EBs in general would be helpful to us. And so there is like a big push, especially with all the deportations. We're seeing a lot more interest by companies in EB-3, a lot of strong companies that are looking into EB-3, because now with everything going on in the world, they just don't have a lot of the same options that they did once upon a time. Where am I from? I'm from a place called Charleston, South Carolina. I was born and raised in Charleston. I went to Emory for undergrad in Atlanta, and then practiced, was a paralegal for some time. And then I went to Duke for law school. I practiced law for about immigration law for about 2-3 years. I was doing some immigration cases, and then I realized that I wanted to do a lot more with that. So I ended up going to decide. Well, actually, what really happened is that this old partner, he's a 50-year partner, was in an office, and he's like, son, I've been in this office for 50 years, and you'll be in that office for 50 years too. I was like, there ain't no way in hell I'm being in anybody's office for 50 years. And so I decided to do something completely different and join the State Department to be a visa officer, because I figured, like, these guys seem pretty terrible. I can do much better than them in being a visa officer. Served in 4 or 5 different countries, and then went off to work at another immigration law firm, and then met up with BDV in 2019, back when there was only like 5 people, back when it was Mitchell and Britt and Ron Bergnall and Edwin Cooper and all these old people that only the really old people from BDV will remember, or the people who've been around a long time will remember. There's only like 4 or 5, BB and Rachel and some of these other old timers from long, and even Sonia from long ago. But yeah, there's only like a couple of employees back then, and now we have like 200 employees across different visa categories now. But I like to hope that we have maintained and remained who we were, even back when we were just 6 people, or we tried to. And so that's my life and where I'm from in a nutshell. Do you have any idea like how many DQs? What's going on after that? I do not know how many documentarily qualifieds were completed in the first quarter of 2022. Or I guess what you're asking is about I guess you're asking about the visa bulletin in that way. But I don't know off the top of my head. Let's see, my PD is on January 14th, 2022. How long do you think I have to wait for filing my? So if you are in January of 2022, the hope is that by January of 2026, maybe February or March, I would say March of 2026, you should be current to file your 485s, which we're really excited about. We're excited by it. Our employers are excited by it too. Trust me. We can't wait till we start filing and seeing more of these 485s and 765s filed. So yeah, I think that by January, but I think I said this before in the last one, the big tell will be in October. We'll see if there's like a huge movement in October. And then if there's a huge movement in October, that'll give me a lot more hope and belief that we're going to see some movement. Is there any impact of what's going on in the world situation, considering the war and all? There is, it's one of those weird things where I am hopeful, and I'm an eternal optimist, but I'm hopeful that with the situation in Iran, that the Trump administration, and I just heard President Trump talking he says that he's going to be meeting with Iran next week, or his team's going to be meeting with Iran next week. My hope is that we're going to find a solution in a way to ratchet down the pressure and find a way to help Iranians and all the people who are impacted by the travel ban, but particularly Iranians. I think that Iranians have had it bad for so long now in the EB-3 world, and really all of immigration. They've just had it bad for so long. Even when there wasn't a travel ban, an official travel ban, there's always been a travel ban against Iranians. And so anything that can be done that would help them actually get through the process without having to wait 10, 15 years to get through it, because the security checks done, if you think the security checks done on you guys are bad, man, Iranians have it so much worse. And they always have, even before the travel ban. There's always been a travel ban on Iranians. And so my hope is that we'll see some movement on that. But the world is as it is, and people tend to revert back to where they've always been with that kind of stuff. And so I don't think that there will be much of an impact, regrettably, for now. But I do hope that, especially next week, after the meetings between the Trump administration and the Iranians, that we'll see some promise. Any update on the Dignity Act? No. Well, the Dignity Act would improve EB-3 tangentially by improving all the other visa categories and by exempting dependents. But no one's going to do anything on EB-3 or any immigration reform until after the big beautiful bill gets passed, and the Trump administration believes they deported enough people, right? And so, these ICE raids and everything that have been going on, it really is. So President Obama did the same thing back in 2013, 2014, And fun fact, or I don't know if it's a fun fact, but it's a fact that President Obama deported far more people than any U.S. president ever has. And the reason why he did it was because he wanted to create space for immigration reform. Now, the Republicans didn't really care. Like, you can deport as many people as you want. We're not going to work with you, especially in 2014. But the Trump administration believes, and the guy who ran Obama's deportation program, Tom Homan, is now running Trump's deportation program. So the hope is that by running that deportation program and getting all these people regrettably deported, that they're going to create space in order to do immigration reform. And so the people who've written the Dignity Act, that's what they're waiting on. They want to see what's going to happen. In the next years, will the EB-3 process be shorter? I don't know. I think the good news is that it's not getting any longer. I think a lot of people have predicted that it was going to be a really, really bad wait. It has not gotten worse, and that's positive. And for those of us who've been in this space for 15, 20 years, we know that it's always cyclical, right? There's never been like a permanent retrogression ever. Like it always goes up, it always goes down. One just never knows. I do anticipate that just given the challenges to navigate the process, that you'll probably see less applicants. You've already started seeing a trickle down in applicants just across the board. And that will inevitably help the process through. And so because there are fewer people in the pipeline, I do believe that you're going to see a lot more movement next year. At least that's the hope. Now, what could hurt that is any kind of movement to help H-2Bs, because H-2Bs can qualify for EB-3, right? And so let's say that they make H-2B uncapped. That'd be great in some ways, but in some ways that's a little bit dicey, unless they said it's uncapped, but you can't file for green cards, because most of the H-2B people would file for EB-3 Unskilled. Now, some of them probably could do EB-3 Skilled, but that always adds to a potential to the pipeline. Let's see. Do you have any information on DACA Embassy moving fast with you, or will they separate it? I have not heard of DACA moving faster. They are trying to do as much as they can. I do know that much, but they still have a bit of a backlog, and their backlog is still running a little bit more than the backlog for the general backlog. And I've talked about this before, that some embassies and consulates have an even bigger backlog, and therefore they impose their own visa bulletin to slow things down. Let's see, the 16,000. Let's see, the question was the 16,000 visa backlog for EB-3, rest of world include dependents. Yes, the visa backlogs all include dependents, and so that's why exempting dependents would be very, very beneficial if they would do that. Let's see, regarding BDV clients, are there many interviews happening? No, there are lots of interviews. We've had a lot of interview action, and the vast majority of them have actually been approved. We've had a couple that have been administrative processing, but that's usually around the fact that the officers don't always know what EB-3 is, and they get very, very confused by it. And so sometimes they want to put it on hold, or they want to get clarification from the employer too. So, but for the most part, if people are interviewing, we're able to do that. So, and then there was another question about Bangladesh, and like I said, I think the problem with Bangladesh is they have fewer officers, and then they have more of a backlog, especially on family-based cases. And the family-based cases are always going to be give priority over employment-based cases, always. Let's see. Any good news on prevailing wage or priority date for 22 or 4/28, 2022? I hope so next year. I hope that by April or May or June of next year, your case will be up. So if your priority date is in 2022, I have a lot of hope for you for 2026. Let's see. As a former consular officer, what would your advice be for someone with an approved I-140 applying for an H-2B visa? 2 prior J-1 visas that were, not an EB-3 question, but I'll answer it anyway. So if I were looking at somebody with an approved I-140 applying for an H-2B, I would be very, very hesitant on that. And the reason is that H-2B is a temporary visa. It's not a permanent visa, whereas an I-140 seems to imply that you have immigrant intent. And so you should sign up for Argo and talk to Argo because, if you have an I-140 approved and you have 2 prior J1s and now you're applying for H-2B, depending on what country you're coming from, I can see some officers being like, this is kind of weird. Like, why do you seem to be coming back and forth to the U.S.? And in that kind of situation, what I would advise people is, when you do that interview, you really have to stress that I-140, and depends on your circumstance. I don't know what the I-140 is for, if it's one of our cases or somebody else's case, but you really have to stress that I-140 might take a long time, and therefore you plan on traveling back and forth. And I would also stress that the fact that you have an approved I-140 and you had these prior Js, but you follow the law, is evidence that you would follow the law with the H-2B as well. And so you really have to find a way to convince or sell the officer on the idea that you aren't basically trying to come back into the U.S. to overstay or live in the U.S. Yet. Let's see. For February 2024, I have a really hard time judging that, right? And I say that because, I think the people I can make an estimate, or what I think to be an estimate for people whose PDs are in 2022 or 2021. For anybody after that, I have no idea what's going to happen, right? Because I remember back in 2019 when we had retrogression, I told people, it's going to be 4 or 5 years before you get your case, or 4 years or whatever before you get your case. But then COVID happened, and then all of a sudden we were current again. And the people I had told, you have to wait for 4 years, suddenly got their green cards immediately. With a few even complaining to me, being like, man, you told me I have to wait all these years and now I have to go to America now. That would be a great problem to have. And so it's really difficult for me to say what's going to happen if you apply now, because so much can change in terms of if Congress passes rules, if they were to exempt dependents, if the administration wants to show more of a priority for workers. And the thing is that because of the crackdowns on ICE by ICE and the crackdowns with the humanitarian parolees, there's been a lot of pressure on the Trump administration to find different avenues. And so they have been looking at EB-3 as being a potential avenue. And so it's very possible that you could be in a world where, in 2027, 2026, there might be an executive order that helps EB-3. And then I'm telling you, well, you have to wait 4 or 5 years. And then it's like, oh, just kidding, you don't. Let's see, skilled or unskilled options for someone from Iraq. Skilled, we don't really do skilled work. I think finding a skilled job is always a lot harder, and the government in general is a lot harder on EB-3 skilled cases than they are on unskilled cases. I think the government has a lot more questions about the skill, about the 2-year experience, or the degree that you have. You have to answer a lot more questions. If you're from Iraq anyway, you're going to have to answer a lot more questions. But certainly your skills and what that skill set is important. Now, the benefit is if you can find an employer to sponsor you, skilled is a little bit shorter as of today than unskilled, but I can't promise you that that's always going to be the case. There was a time when skilled was current and unskilled wasn't, and then that switched, and everyone was rushing to skilled, and then that switched, and so no one really knows what's going to happen. Let's see. Are you talking about the final? The final action date is the one I was talking about. I don't really bother with the date of filing. The reason I don't bother with date of filing is just that, because they're not going to issue your green card unless it's that final action date. And so I think that's the date that's the most important. Let's see, how many people have had their green cards approved? We've had 1,865, 1,900 green cards approved, but probably closer to 20,000, 20,000, my God, I wish, 2,000 green cards approved. BDV is the oldest, most established, most reputable of the EB-3 companies that are out there. We've had the longest track record and the biggest amount of green card approvals by far. And are any of those approved, including those who have had family reunification? I don't think so. I think all of our people have all been approved through our EB-3 program. Good idea though. We should share our data on year over year approvals. I think we already do, but I'll ask my team to do that. My priority date is October 2021. I would imagine that your priority date should be current in October of this year or November of this year. If your priority date is October 18th, but we'll find out a lot more in mid-September how much the numbers are going to move. Should I refrain from visiting the U.S. after my LC got approved? No. So the big secret with the State Department is that, and CBP and USCIS, or CBP rather, is that they really don't have data on LC approvals. It's only when you file the I-140 and you have a 45 that the government can see. But that shouldn't discourage you from visiting the U.S., even with an approved I-140, or even a filed I-140. You might get a lot more questions about it. But what you should say is that, the I-140 just takes a lot longer to get approved. I'm doing this for a long-term thing, but my commitment is still to come to the U.S. quickly and then leave the U.S. quickly. I'm not coming to stay while my LC is approved. Now, the only time I would tell people to refrain is if your case was current, right? If you have, if you're a consular and your case is current, you may not want to travel because I can see them asking then like, oh, because what a lot of people do is that when their case becomes current and consular, they'll come over to the U.S. and file for adjustment of status and then start their life in the U.S. Early. And CBP is aware of that. And so sometimes they will use that to turn people around. So, or at least to ask more questions than they should have. Let's see. There's 10,000 green cards released. So please share how many candidates had I-140 completed. Oh, like across the world? I have no idea. I think I have an idea, but I don't think I will come back to that question though, because I do want to think about how to best approach that, because I don't think that there's no, because a lot of the I-140 numbers, like I've said before, I have doubts that a lot of those are real, because a lot of them are double filings. 20 to 30% of those are double filings. 20 to 30% of them don't really want to do the program anymore, have already moved on with their lives, don't want to do it. And that's something that the government somewhat acknowledges, but there's really not been a way to do anything about it, because legally you really can't do something. You have to change the law in order to make people declare and do stuff. Maybe if Elon Musk was still in there, he could make them do it. But yeah, I'm skeptical and the government's skeptical on the I-140 approved numbers, just because we don't think that a lot of those numbers are actually still real. Let's see. So I have a question here about TPS. And this actually has to be my last question. I'm sorry, guys, I have to go after this. But with TPS, I would tell people, I know TPS for Nepalese have been canceled. You can still do consular processing, which is great. You could change to F1, which is something that's also great. I would wait on leaving and wait on anything with TPS Nepal. And I say that only because I remember, and I've said this before, during the last Trump administration, they canceled TPS, and then court stepped in to stop them from doing that. And I suspect that you're going to see that happen here too. I think that the ones that they canceled from Venezuela under Biden were more recent. And Biden did it in a way that was a little bit sketchy is not the word, but certainly probably not as legally sound as some of these older TPS models. And so I think that those people can't switch over to consular, but I would want to wait to see what's going to happen with the government, and also see if there's going to be lawsuits, and see if there are ways to do that. Because I am not sure that it's actually going to be enforced, that you're actually going to have to leave. Let's see. I'll run through this. Anything I can answer quickly. Can I apply for? I assume this means EB-5 or an EB-3 process. Yes. Or if you mean E2, yes. If you mean EB, yeah. Any EBs you can do. You can apply for virtually any visa, except for EB-4. EB-4 is a little bit tricky, and be able to do this. Oh yeah, and A's. You can't do A's either. But for the most part, any visas that you apply, any non-immigrant visas you have, you can use for that. And if you want to apply for, and that's actually the problem with the visa bulletin and retrogression, is that lots of people do file multiple cases, right? People file for EB-5, EB-1, EB-2, EB-3. They file for whatever they can and just see which one works, right? Even us as a company, we've had people pay and ask to be able to file in multiple locations. So I mean, when you're doing that, that's always risky, because then you're going to see a lot more tricks and risks with it. Okay, everyone. I think that is going to be it for today. I'm going to try again to do this again next week. I should be in town, or wherever I am. I'll definitely do it. But definitely keep those questions coming. You can always email me, message our team. We're always here. Always here to answer questions. One thing I did want to say is that I know that a lot of people will message me and be like, man, Chris, like, you guys are, you're this, you're that, you're why, you had all these dropouts, you're this, and that's fine. Like, right. Like, I take the hits like anybody else. But what I don't like is, and I won't abide by, is misinformation and people deliberately not telling the truth, especially people who aren't clients, right? Or people who haven't signed up for the process. I think there's a lot of our competitors, and God bless them, our competitors really do try to stir up trouble in our Facebook groups and WhatsApp groups, et cetera, about us. But I think that, even with all the problems in the world, and even all the things going on with immigration, and even all of our own problems with sponsor dropouts, this is still one of the best paths to getting a green card and living and staying in the U.S. And it's also, we are the best company to help people achieve those dreams and get there. And I hear that constantly from foreign nationals. And I always tell people, you don't have to trust me, even though I am a former government official. You can just trust our numbers, right? Like, we've had 2,000 green cards approved, close to 2,000 green cards approved. We've had lots and lots of I-140s approved. We've had lots and lots of helped tons of people get through the DLL process with minimal delays or minimal denials. And yeah, we're not always going to get it perfect. No company does. Like, I know our competitors. I talk to those guys all the time, and trust me, they are not getting it perfect either. And a lot of them have far more in the way of sponsor dropouts and denials, and their rates are even a little bit worse than ours. And so I would tell you that this is a big group. A lot of people out there got a lot of opinions about what it is, but I've worked in 3 international law firms, and I work with literally the smartest people in the United States in the State Department. U.S. diplomats. To become a U.S. diplomat is an incredibly difficult job. I don't know how I got it, but I knew a lot of smart people who worked in it. And I can say by far, this group of people are really the all-stars of immigration. Everybody who comes to work every day at BDV really is an all-star in immigration. A lot of them are former clients. A lot of them are really educated people who've been in this process for a number of years and who really have our clients' best interests at heart. And so if it means anything, I just want to reiterate that, we really do pride ourselves on trying to be transparent. We pride ourselves on trying to answer as many questions as we have. Sometimes the answers aren't the ones you want. That doesn't mean we're not transparent. It's just not the answer you want. And we try not to, we try to help our clients as much as possible. Sometimes it doesn't happen, but we do try. I certainly try. And I get up every morning thinking about our clients. I go to bed every night thinking about our clients. I sometimes dream about this job and finding ways to make it better for our clients. And, if there's anything that we can do, we want to help. And we definitely do try our best. So on that closing note, I do want to just give a shout out and a thank you to the EB-3 BDD staff who are watching, just to say thank you for all that you do. Continue doing what you're doing and making differences in these people's lives. But thanks, everybody. I'll see you guys next Wednesday. Thanks, everyone.